Kenya. I'm the director of a conservation consultancy called Conservation Solutions Africa, based in Nanyuki, which is in central Kenya. Here in the US, I'm also an affiliate faculty at Colorado State University, and I'm at Michigan State University right now at the invitation of Bob Montgomery, and doing various things with the Snares to Wares initiative.
Throughout those organizations and all the work that you do, I'm sure that there's major themes that you follow throughout your professional career. How would you describe those themes?
Yeah, I'd say I started in the field of ecology, so my first specialization, if you will, was carnivore ecology, but with reference to the interface with humans. So it was mainly human-wildlife conflict. And I also got into wetlands ecology and looking at how humans utilize wetlands resources. And as the years have gone by, I still work in those different fields, but I'm also getting into policy and the ethical questions and political questions around wildlife conservation vis-a-vis the needs of people in Africa and other parts of the world.
What would you describe as the major stakeholders of these interactions, both at the conservation level and also at the community level?
Yes, that's true. We are needing to move towards the human dimensions, because there's expansion of agriculture, expansion of infrastructure. The human footprint is growing, not just from numbers of people, but from what the people are doing. So we are having a lot more encroachment, if you will, into natural habitats. So we need to embrace all the groups. Now these groups include obviously the statutory authorities. In Kenya, that would be Kenya Wildlife Service, who are mandated to manage wildlife on behalf of the Kenyan people and enforce wildlife conservation laws. Other than that, you have farmers who are occupying these same lands. You have livestock producers who are keeping livestock in these lands. You have the tourists who come to see the wildlife. In some countries where sport hunting is allowed, these include hunters who come to hunt some of these wildlife. So you have a whole mix of different needs, and all these are human groups. So we cannot address the needs of all these groups just by studying the animals. We need to study the human dimension, the politics around it, the culture around it, the different costs and sacrifices that people need to make for wildlife to survive. Because if we didn't make enough sacrifices, we lose all our wildlife. Human beings are capable of occupying every space on the face of this earth and not leave any for animals. And I think as students, scientists, practitioners, our expertise needs to be working out how to divide this limited resource between us and biodiversity.
How do we balance out the competition between stakeholders within this problem?
Yeah, I think that this is a very important field which we must get into now, because in Africa and many other parts of the world, we have a new phenomenon which people we call conservation refugees. And these are people who've been moved off their lands to make way not for conservation, but mostly for tourism. Because people with a bit of conflict, people easily share habitats with wildlife in many parts of Africa. But somehow it's the interests of tourism investors that somehow require these people to be moved away, because the tourism product being sold is Africa as a wilderness, Africa without a place without people, a place with wildlife where you come and enjoy splendid isolation, if you will. So this is an ethical and policy question that we as experts must address. Can we divide or separate effectively the principles of conservation from the business of tourism? So we end up conserving biodiversity by learning how to live, how people can live with it, and then we keep our biodiversity, and then we have tourists who come and see a product that includes the local people, because the local people have to go on with their livelihoods, whether they're livestock producers or the farmers, and they need to go places that they need to go, and we should not be locking them out of certain parts of their homelands because we want to keep those for tourists. So I think herein lies the challenge, herein lies the ethical challenge, because scientists should no longer be coming up with solutions like we need to put up a fence to separate these people from this area because this area is now left for elephants, or it's left for lions, or it's left for tourists. So we need to change the way we think about these things, and we need to do away with those old sort of romantic ideas of African wilderness. Africa is now a place with people, and they're doing stuff, and they're busy, and they're traveling back and forth. So you cannot find empty places except few parts of Namibia maybe, and Sudan. You might find some really relatively empty wilderness, but much of East Africa, Southern Africa is occupied by people, and we need to change our thinking as conservationists to embrace that.
How would you suggest then that we coexist with these animals?
Yeah, one thing, there is no one sort of one size fits all solution, but there are a few principles that we must practice all the time. First of all, we have to embrace the fact that these problems are complex. There are a lot of places where we've sought simplistic solutions, include things like fences, or when you have retaliatory killings. If you want to do a simplistic solution, you go out there and arrest people and put them in jail and threaten them that if you kill a lion again, you're gonna go to jail for 10 years or something like that. And these are violations of their rights, because they've got a right to raise their livestock in their homes safely. Sometimes it's attacks on humans. People have a right to live where they need to live safely without danger of being killed by a wild animal. So the solutions have to be complex. Some of them involve getting people to change certain habits. If you live in a wildlife area, don't be walking across, taking shortcuts across the bush at dusk. Maybe stick to the roads, or travel in the daytime. These are adjustments that we as humans are able to make because we can get bicycles or motorcycles and all that, and move around faster and be more efficient in what we do. The other things are like initiatives that touch on livelihoods, like for example the Snares to Wares initiative. It's if you look at it, it's working now, but it's a highly complex mix of talking to people, trying to develop new skills, understanding people's needs, understanding the bottom line, understanding the reasons behind what we perceive as wildlife crime. Some of them are not reasons out of malice, they're simple livelihood needs. And what we provide through things like Snares and Wares, and Snares to Wares, sorry, and developing livelihoods is simply providing food and filling in the gap that may have been filled by illegal harvesting of wildlife. Often it's not commercial, often it's subsistence. So that guy needs some protein, so go and capture a small animal to eat, but if he has a livelihood, he can raise chickens or go and buy meat and substitute it in some other way. The other important thing is the social impact of such investments, such social investments. You get to know the people get to know that this group of people from 1,000 miles away in the US are here because they care about the wildlife and they care about us as a people. If someone comes from farther afield and only cares about the wildlife, it immediately grows hostility. It can even create hostility that was not there towards the wildlife even before the guy came. So it's important. The importance of this project is that it's including sociology, it's including economics, it's including livelihood options in addition to conservation. So it takes time, it takes money, and it's complicated. But these are the solutions that ultimately are sustainable. Throwing a lot of money and guns and helicopters and ammunition at such a problem would it would cause a war. It's a recipe for conflict, and it's not sustainable in Africa today. The way national parks were established in the late 19th century and early 20th century was with guns and violence and violation of rights, and we can no longer do that today because the world is a different place.
Do you see this initiative being transposable to other communities in other places where you would consider human-wildlife conflict to be an issue? And if so, what do you think are some of the challenges of being able to implement this type of initiative into those other spaces?
Obviously with some, it is the principle is transferable. And the principle is noble in that it looks at livelihood options. Obviously, you have to make some changes. It could probably make a change in what people are doing or what people are actually making. Some places like in northern Kenya, Masai land, you'll find there's already existing skill in terms of producing beadwork. So you might pick up on that and not need to introduce a new skill, because snares to wares, the amazing thing about it is that they've taught this skill to a lot of people. A few people probably had the skill of producing wire sculptures, but certainly not the number that are doing it now, and certainly not the level of skill at which it's being done now. So other places you could pick on another product like that. Sometimes you could even use existing livelihoods, like you could go to a place and develop marketing for livestock products. It could be beef and leather and all that is labeled as wildlife friendly because it's produced without compromising wildlife habitats. So there's a whole range of different products you could do, but the principle remains the same, that you're providing a livelihood to the people that does not involve consumption of wildlife and does not involve necessarily getting into tourism, because everyone's trying to do tourism now, and tourism, as we all know, is a highly skilled, highly specialized industry that not everyone is equipped to get into. And the other special thing about what this principle, like what Snares to Wares is doing, it's conservation that does not involve controlling land or in any way fencing off land. It does not have a geographical component. It's about people. It's not about a piece of land. It's not about a certain area. It's about people doing something. And that's really important, because right now, one of the biggest problems with conservation in Africa is that it's taking land away from people. And that has obvious rights violations that we will have to, that are not sustainable politically.
How do we make people care about this initiative?
First of all, there are lots of people who care because African wildlife species are so charismatic. They're big, they're beautiful, they're amazing, they're strong and all that. So it's not much of a step to make people get fascinated by lions or elephants or giraffes, whatever the case may be. But there's another level at which the human contact is important. This is the level at which people see you having transformed someone's life. And transforming someone's life is not necessarily having made him $1 million or having made him wealthy, something like that. It's about someone who was sneaking about in the bush and engaging in criminal activity, but now is sitting in a workshop doing a legal activity and making a living for himself and his kids and his family out of that. Now, that is where science fails a bit, because we always want to be able to measure things, and it's not easy to measure dignity. But what Snares to Wares does, the underlying principle that makes such things attractive to people in Africa, including myself, is the dignity about it. That you've turned this guy from a criminal into someone who's doing legal work for himself and making money. He's not working for you guys. he's working for himself and he's making money, and he's not working in an industry that serves you like tourism. Or not to say that is not that's not dignified work, but you've created something that they want to do using a skill set that he's proud of, and I think that's very important, and it's something very rare. Sadly, it's still very rare in the conservation field, because the most successful conservation organizations are counted as those that are most successful in fundraising. They raise millions of dollars. So they go somewhere and they have $1 million to spend on fencing. Then they've got another $1 million to employ these people as guards to patrol the fence. And they've got another $1 million to build a tourism facility and employ these people as chefs or waiters in this tourism facility. That may be good work. It would make them a living, but it may not necessarily be what these people would like to be doing. It might not be within the skill set they have. It might not be sustainable in that you have a terrorist attack or in somewhere in Europe, nothing to do with these guys' fault, and tourism crashes. And there goes the livelihood. A short while ago, we had an Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone. It hit tourism in Kenya, and yet in terms of miles, Sierra Leone is probably closer to the United States than Kenya. It's that far away. but that's how tourism works. And that's why, as much as it can make profit, tourism is a very fickle industry. And that's why we need to look for things that are a bit more sophisticated than that. And even with the Snares wares, it will drive tourism, because all the materials you guys show these guys working, and there's their names. There'll be someone who will want to go there to meet this artisan that he saw building this lion sculpture. And it will even drive tourism, but it's not the main thing. Tourism will be a spin-off. And tourism is supposed to be a spin-off of conservation. It's never supposed to be the reason for conservation. You should conserve and you do good stuff, and then someone says, wow, I want to go and see that. But we should not create a world that we think someone wants to come and see, and then sit and wait for him to come. So I think that human engagement, the human face of it, is what's really important, and that's what will drive the success. Because if you want to see a lion, you could probably see one in Detroit Zoo. You don't have to go to Uganda or Kenya to see a lion. And even when you get to Africa, you don't have to go to Kenya. You could see a lion in South Africa. So what's going to make you come back to Kenya or Uganda? It's the Ugandan people or the Kenyan people, because that's what's unique to that place.
Do you see the African culture, the East African culture, being represented accurately through Snares to Wares and through the art that's being produced?
Yes, I think I see it. I see it, and I think I see it in that the culture of the place these wares come from is a culture of a people who live close to wildlife. They see wildlife. That's why they make it so accurately. They know what a lion looks like, its body shape and all that. I've seen some of the works, and they're amazingly accurate, to be made from wire, not from carved clay or anything. And it's also a culture of people who have, who it shows that they admire the animal. It's in the way, in traditional African cultures, attention to detail is admiration of an animal. Something he doesn't admire, probably he won't be able to reproduce it accurately. And this is an important question, because culture is dynamic. We've seen the tourism industry selling African cultures like Maasai culture, for example, as part of their tourism product. But what they're selling is a time warp sort of thing. They're selling the noble savage, which no longer exists today. There are many Maasai people out there who are strongly attached to their culture, but you'll never see him dressed in beads and all that. And there are many Maasai dances you see being performed to people who have no idea what the dance actually means. So we are sort of commodifying it, turning the culture into a commodity without seeking to understand it. And I think that there are remnants of the culture that are still there and are still relevant. There are some which are gone, and we can document them and all that, but we need not try and impose them on people now who don't need to live that way or do these things. So I think the duty of us as outsiders, even that's including myself because I'm not Maasai. If I go to Maasai, a certain place in Maasai land, I want to understand how those people there live, what they do, what are their aspirations and those kind of things. So we need not pick pieces of Maasai culture like the beadwork and say we love the beadwork, but we don't love the livestock. The livestock is probably even more important part of Maasai culture than the beadwork. So we as conservationists need to develop ways of raising livestock sustainably and strengthening livestock production so that it doesn't interfere with conservation. And then then we'll come up with a solution that's sustainable. I mean, it's not easy, but that's why we seek expertise. We should not seek expertise to come up with things like fencing. One doesn't need to go to school to learn about that. Yeah.
What do you consider is the ideal role that an outsider in East African conservation, not only within house in Michigan State University, but also that's applicable to anybody that's seeing how we are working and they want to use our paradigm in their own research?
Yeah, I think, and as I said earlier, it's unfortunate that this is more the exception than the rule. It is important to have external input because and external input meaning like people from the United States, from Europe, from Asia, or wherever, or even other African countries coming into a given place to try and strengthen or improve conservation outcomes. The important thing is to do away with preconceived notions, and this is not as easy as it sounds, because again, people coming from the United States, you're going to work in Africa, you need to raise some funds. What do you need to do to raise funds? You need to write a proposal to raise those funds. A proposal by definition is based on preconceived notions. You're writing about what you think is the problem in Uganda and how you think you can solve it, and you're hoping this guy will give you money to go and do what you think is right, never having been to Uganda or Kenya. And if you think about this is a very serious contradiction here. So we need to, well, once one gets the money or the means to go there, I think time has to be invested in trying to understand what's going on. Okay, you get to this place, there's poaching. You're seeing animals have lost limbs, some have been killed, some are walking around with snares hanging off their necks and this kind of thing. You've seen that problem, but it's another step to understand why is that happening? Why is it happening to those animals? Why is that kind of wire being used? Where is it coming from? Who are the people doing this? Why are they doing it? Then you get the whole picture. Then you can get a way of trying to address that problem if snaring is a problem in a place. A lot of people, this is what happens in many places in Kenya as well. They come in, they're snaring and all that. They come in with law enforcement agents, arrest a bunch of people, sort of appoint some people to be snitches, for lack of a better word. These guys report their colleagues who get arrested. Then we go around with dart gun and dart these animals with snares and put them down and cut the wire off them. And some with injuries, we treat them and that kind of thing. That's a band-aid. All this is good stuff, but it's really expensive and it's not sustainable, and it's a band-aid. Who's to say that giraffe, you took a snare off its neck, it won't get into another snare the very next day after you spent several $1,000s and doing this kind of treatment. So that understanding is everything. So I think it's important to invest a bit of money in maybe finding a way to visit the place or engage with someone before you get there. So you get an accurate picture of what's on the ground before you even write your proposal. So you know sort of what you're trying to address, and you don't run into trouble. Because again, donors, I've given you $1 million to go and sort out lion poaching in Murchison Falls. I don't want to hear after 3 months that you're still working out things with the community. Donors want instant gratification, and we need to engage with them to tell them that it doesn't work that way because it involves people. Anything that just involves animals, we can go and do it tomorrow if we have all the equipment and money needed. But when it involves people, you have to work, you have to invest time, talk to them, understand them, make them understand you, and make sure you're creating something that does not go against local people's aspirations. And you can only do that by understanding those aspirations first. Poaching is not an aspiration. No one grows up wanting to poach. They grew up just wanting to make a good living. So he was poaching because he needed protein. So now we can address that that was the aspiration. So we can address that in another way. And I think that's the important thing that people need to take from this. The Snares to Wares initiative, I'm sure when Dr. Montgomery first went there, this is not what he had in mind. He could never have had this in mind. He went and worked it out on the fly over there, that these guys can do this, they need this, they've got this skill, this, maybe we can do this. Then he came back and maybe developed the idea further to the very sophisticated thing it is now. And that's an investment in time. It may not be much investment in terms of money, relatively, but it's an investment in time.
What do you think is the future of conservation?
I think the future of conservation, first I can tell you what it's not. The future of conservation is not guns or fences or helicopters and patrol vehicles. That's dead, that's a dinosaur. And anyone doing that is working on limited time. It will work as long as the grant lasts. At the end of the grant, that's dead. The future of conservation is in conflict resolution. And I think the future of conservation is in people who understand human societies, not those who understand animal societies or animal communities. Ecology, we've been there, we've done that. But the future lies in those who can handle that interface between humans and wildlife, not drive a wedge between humans and wildlife. Teach us how to live together and integrate as far as possible. Because humans have a special gift in that we can manipulate the carrying capacity of our environment. We can reduce our footprint when we need to. We can decide to cycle to work and all that, reduce carbon footprint when and if we want to. So let's use that skill, because that's where the future lies. The future lies in those who are best able to handle human aspirations and human societies. It doesn't lie in those who are best able to seize control of lands. And there are many organizations doing that. The Nature Conservancy is busy seizing control of lands in Africa and so many other places in the world, even seascapes. There's no future in that. That's a recipe for conflict. And conflict will come. It's not a matter of if, but whenever you seize people's land. And because human beings can only be pushed so far. So conservation must seek to resolve the interface between humans and wildlife, not set aside places for humans, set aside places for wildlife, because humans and wildlife in Africa have never existed in isolation from each other. That's why we have our folklore is full of these wild animals. And we have all sorts of contraptions and devices we made sometimes to keep these animals away from our homes, sometimes to trap them where we were using them for food. And that's how we developed. We grew and developed with them. So we just have to change things so that it becomes sustainable, because we don't want to lose them. And that's where the future lies. So the future lies very much in the sophisticated human dimension, sociology, the anthropologist, the art about it, the communication skills about it. And money, I think the lesson for the whole conservation world to learn is that money cannot substitute for any of these things. So the Nature Conservancy is going to have to communicate despite the fact that they have got billions of dollars. It will not substitute for communication. And the fact that they acquire land legally within the context of the places they do it, won't stop people from sort of invading that land and refusing to leave. So the question is going to be, are you willing to shed blood for conservation? And we shouldn't need to do that. So the future is in communication, dialogue, and complex solutions, not big money and simplistic solutions. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.